The subway ride home felt longer than usual that night. Clara sat near the fogged window with her coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders, while Manhattan blurred past in streaks of rain and yellow light. Around her, exhausted strangers stared at their phones or slept against cold metal poles, unaware that her entire life had shifted somewhere between a ballroom and an old photograph. She could still hear Ethan's final words repeating inside her head. "Ask your mother about Vienna. Ask her why she disappeared." Clara closed her eyes briefly. Her mother never spoke about Europe, never spoke about the years before Brooklyn, and she never spoke about Clara's father. As a child, Clara had stopped asking after watching pain settle across Sophia's face every single time. Some silences became rules inside small apartments. By the time Clara climbed the narrow stairs to their building in Brooklyn, it was almost 1 in the morning. The hallway smelled faintly of old radiator heat and someone's burned coffee from another floor. Apartment 4B glowed softly beneath the crack of warm light under the door. Clara stepped inside quietly. The familiar scent of chamomile tea and sheet music greeted her immediately. Their apartment was tiny but alive with memory. Old piano books stacked beside the couch. Framed concert posters faded by time. A worn upright piano near the window overlooking the rain-soaked street below. Sophia Hale sat wrapped in a pale gray blanket beside the lamp, reading glasses low on her nose while soft classical music played from an old record player nearby. Even illness had not stolen her elegance completely. Her silver blonde hair remained carefully brushed. Her posture still carried traces of the pianist she once had been. "You are late tonight," Sophia said softly without looking up from the sheet music in her lap. Clara placed her bag down slowly. There was a gala at the hotel. Rich people celebrating themselves again? A faint smile touched Sophia's lips. Clara usually smiled back at comments like that. Tonight she did not. Sophia noticed immediately. Mothers always did. Her hands stilled against the paper. "Clara." Clara removed her coat carefully and walked toward the piano bench. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she reached into her apron pocket and placed Ethan's photograph gently onto the piano keys. Sophia's entire body froze. Completely. The room seemed to lose all sound except the rain outside the apartment window. Clara watched the color slowly disappear from her mother's face. Her trembling fingers touched the edge of the photograph like someone touching a ghost. "Where did you get this?" Sophia whispered. Clara sat down slowly across from her. "A man at the hotel gave it to me." Sophia looked up sharply now. Fear moved visibly through her expression. Not confusion. Recognition. "What man?" Clara swallowed carefully. "Ethan Calloway." The name hit harder than Clara expected. Sophia's hand slipped from the photograph. The old piano key beneath it released a soft broken note into the room. "No," Sophia breathed. "No, he cannot know about you." Clara stared at her mother in silence. "About you. Not about me. About you." The wording settled heavily inside Clara's chest. "Who was Daniel Calloway?" she asked quietly. Sophia closed her eyes instantly like the question itself hurt. "Clara? Please." Her voice cracked softly for the first time all night. "I met his brother tonight. He showed me this photograph. He said you disappeared before you were supposed to marry Daniel." Sophia turned slowly toward the rain-darkened window. Tears shimmered silently in her tired eyes. "I did not disappear," she whispered. "I was made to vanish." Clara felt cold move through her entire body. Sophia reached shakily toward the piano bench beside her and opened the hidden compartment underneath. From inside, she removed the small velvet box Clara remembered from childhood. Her fingers trembled as she opened it beneath the lamp light. The matching silver ring rested inside exactly where it always had. Quiet. Waiting. Sophia stared at it for several seconds before speaking again. "If Ethan Calloway found you," she said softly, "then the past finally caught up with us." The apartment remained silent long after Sophia's words faded into the room. Clara sat motionless beside the piano while rain slid slowly down the window behind them like the city itself was listening. "Made to vanish." The sentence replayed inside her head again and again. Sophia closed the velvet box carefully, her fragile fingers lingering against the silver ring before hiding it back beneath the piano bench. For years Clara had believed her mother's silence came from heartbreak. Tonight she realized it came from fear. "Who made you disappear?" Clara asked softly. Sophia lowered her eyes. "The Callaways." Clara felt disbelief rise instantly. "Ethan?" "No." Sophia shook her head quickly. "Not Ethan. His father." She leaned back slowly against the chair, exhaustion settling visibly across her pale face. Richard Callaway controlled everything. The company, the family, the newspapers, even the people around him breathed carefully. Clara had heard that name before. Richard Callaway, legendary financier, ruthless businessman, dead nearly 10 years now. The kind of man magazines called brilliant and employees called terrifying when cameras were gone. Sophia stared toward the piano keys without really seeing them. "Daniel was different," she whispered. "Kind. Reckless sometimes. But kind." Clara listened quietly while thunder rolled faintly over Brooklyn outside. "We met in Vienna," Sophia continued. "I was 22 and performing at a conservatory competition. Daniel came because he hated business dinners and preferred concert halls." A faint smile touched her lips for the first time that night. "He sat in the front row every evening pretending he understood classical music." Clara almost smiled too. Almost. "He followed me for 3 blocks after the final performance just to tell me I played too beautifully to look so sad." Sophia's eyes glistened now with memories she had buried for decades. "Nobody had ever spoken to me like that before." Clara looked down at her hands. She suddenly understood why her mother still played piano even through pain severe enough to shake her fingers. Music was not simply memory. It was the last surviving piece of someone she had lost. "What happened after that?" Clara asked carefully. Sophia's expression darkened immediately. "Richard Callaway happened." The warmth vanished from the room again. "Daniel brought me to New York 6 months later. We became engaged quietly because his father already hated me." Clara frowned. "Why?" Sophia laughed softly without humor. "Because I was not rich enough. Not connected enough. Not useful enough." Her voice remained calm, but Clara could hear the old wound beneath every word. People like Richard Callaway did not see marriage as love. They saw acquisitions, alliances, bloodlines. Clara felt anger rising slowly in her chest now. "And Daniel?" "He threatened to leave the family." Sophia's fingers tightened together weakly beneath the blanket. "He said he would walk away from everything if his father forced him to choose." The rain intensified outside. Traffic lights reflected red and gold across the wet Brooklyn streets below. Sophia looked toward the window as though searching through another lifetime. 3 days before the wedding, Richard invited me to his office alone. Clara sat straighter immediately. Sophia swallowed slowly. "He offered me money first. A great deal of money. Enough to disappear quietly. You refused." "Of course I refused." Her voice cracked softly now. "I loved Daniel." Clara felt her throat tighten. "Then what?" Sophia closed her eyes. "Then he told me something that changed everything." Silence filled the apartment again. Clara waited. Sophia's breathing grew uneven. "Richard knew I was pregnant before Daniel did." Clara stopped breathing for a second. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm. Sophia opened her eyes slowly and looked directly at her daughter. "He said if I stayed," she whispered, "I would destroy Daniel's future, ruin the company, and spend the rest of my life watching powerful people punish the people I loved." Clara stared at her mother in shock. "So you left?" Sophia nodded once. A single tear slipped quietly down her face. "I thought I was protecting you both." Then her voice dropped almost to a whisper. 2 weeks later, Daniel was dead. The record player reached the end of the song sometime after midnight, but neither Clara nor Sophia moved to stop the soft scratching sound circling endlessly through the apartment. Clara sat frozen beside the piano while her mother's final sentence echoed through every corner of the room. 2 weeks later, Daniel was dead. Outside, Brooklyn traffic hissed across wet streets beneath the storm. Somewhere downstairs, a neighbor laughed faintly through thin apartment walls. Ordinary sounds. Ordinary life. Yet nothing felt ordinary anymore. Clara looked toward the old velvet box still resting beside the piano keys. The silver ring inside no longer looked romantic. It looked dangerous. "Do you believe it was really an accident?" Clara asked quietly. Sophia's silence answered first. Long, heavy. Then finally, "For years I tried to convince myself it was." Clara felt cold move slowly through her chest. Sophia pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders before continuing. Richard Calloway controlled newspapers, banks, politicians. Men like him did not lose gracefully. Her tired eyes lowered toward the photograph again. But Daniel was stubborn. He told his father he would leave the company completely if he could not marry me. Clara frowned softly. "And Ethan?" Sophia hesitated. Ethan was young then, still in college. Daniel protected him from most of the family business. A faint sadness touched her face. "He used to talk about Ethan constantly. Said his younger brother still had kindness in him." Clara remembered Ethan standing beneath the ballroom lights, pale and shaken while holding that photograph like something fragile enough to break him. Haunted. That was the word she kept returning to. Not cruel. Haunted. "Why did you never tell me any of this?" Clara asked. Sophia looked genuinely ashamed now. "Because I wanted you free from them." Her voice trembled softly. "After Daniel died, Richard sent someone to find me. Not to comfort me, to warn me." Clara's stomach tightened instantly. "Warn you about what?" Sophia reached slowly toward the nearby bookshelf and removed an old envelope hidden between music binders. The paper had yellowed with age. No return address. No signature. Clara unfolded the letter carefully beneath the lamplight. For typed sentences stared back at her. "You will not contact the Calloway family again. You will raise the child privately. Any attempt to expose this matter will result in consequences. Forget Daniel Calloway ever existed." Clara felt anger rise so quickly it almost frightened her. "They threatened you." Sophia looked toward the rain-darkened window again. "I was 23, pregnant, alone, and terrified. Richard Calloway made certain I understood exactly how powerless I was." Clara folded the letter slowly, her hands shaking now. All her life she had watched her mother survive quietly. Piano lessons, hospital visits, long nights balancing bills at the kitchen table while pretending everything would somehow work out. Clara used to think Sophia simply feared the past because it hurt too much. Now she understood her mother feared it because powerful people had trained her to disappear from it completely. "Did Ethan know about me?" Clara asked softly. Sophia shook her head immediately. "No. Daniel never got the chance to tell him." Clara stared at the floor for several silent seconds before asking the question that had begun forming the moment Ethan showed her the photograph. "Do you think Ethan believes I am Daniel's daughter?" Sophia closed her eyes briefly. "He probably realized it the moment he saw your face." Silence settled over them again. Then suddenly Sophia leaned forward, gripping Clara's wrist with surprising urgency. "Listen to me carefully." Clara looked up. Fear filled her mother's eyes now. Real fear. If Ethan starts searching for the truth, other people may notice too. People connected to the old family business. People who protected Richard. Clara frowned. "Richard is dead. Power like that does not die cleanly," Sophia whispered. The lamp beside the piano flickered softly as thunder rolled outside once more. Then Sophia's expression changed suddenly. Her eyes fixed toward the apartment door. Clara noticed it too a second later. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. Followed by a quiet knock against the front door at nearly 2 in the morning. The knock came again. Soft this time. Almost polite. But inside the apartment, every muscle in Clara's body tightened instantly. Sophia's fingers remained wrapped around her wrist, cold and trembling. "Do not open it," her mother whispered. Clara looked toward the front door. The old brass lock reflected faint light from the hallway outside. Another silence followed. Then a man's voice spoke through the door. calm, familiar. Clara. Ethan. Sophia released Clara's wrist immediately and leaned back against the chair as though all her strength had suddenly disappeared. Clara exhaled softly without realizing she had been holding her breath. She crossed the apartment carefully and looked through the peephole. Ethan stood alone in the narrow hallway wearing the same charcoal overcoat from the gala, rainwater still darkening the shoulders. No security. No assistance. Just him. Tired. Waiting. Clara opened the door only halfway. "It is 2 in the morning," she said quietly. Ethan nodded once. "I know. How did you find my address?" A faint shadow crossed his expression. "I own half the building through a real estate subsidiary." Clara stared at him in disbelief for a second before muttering, "Of course you do." For the first time all evening, something close to embarrassment touched Ethan's face. "May I come in?" Clara hesitated. Behind her, Sophia remained perfectly silent near the piano. Ethan noticed immediately. His eyes shifted past Clara toward the apartment interior. Toward Sophia. Everything inside him seemed to stop at once. The billionaire disappeared from his face completely. What remained looked almost like grief. Sophia stared back at him from across the room, pale beneath the lamplight, the velvet ring box still resting beside her hand. Ethan took one slow step inside without speaking. Rain dripped quietly from his coat onto the worn hardwood floor. For several long seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed loudly enough to disturb the silence gathering between decades of unfinished history. Then Ethan spoke softly. "You are alive." Sophia's eyes filled instantly with tears. "So are you." The sentence seemed to strike him harder than anger would have. Ethan looked away briefly, jaw tightening before he regained control. Clara stood near the door watching both of them carefully now. The resemblance between Ethan and the man in the photograph suddenly felt impossible to ignore. Same eyes, same posture, same sadness hidden beneath expensive composure. Ethan slowly approached the piano. His attention drifted toward the silver ring box immediately. "You kept it," he said quietly. Sophia looked down at the box. "Some things are harder to bury than people think." Ethan swallowed once. Clara noticed how exhausted he suddenly looked beneath the apartment light. Not physically exhausted. Emotionally. Like someone carrying years of unanswered questions too heavy to keep holding alone. "Why did you never tell us?" he asked softly. Sophia laughed faintly through tears. "Tell you what? That Richard threatened me? That Daniel died 2 weeks after I disappeared? That I spent 27 years terrified someone would take my daughter away because of your family name?" Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The pain crossing his expression looked genuine enough to silence the room. "I did not know," he whispered. Sophia nodded slowly. "I believe you." Clara watched Ethan carefully now. Powerful men usually defended themselves quickly. Explained. Redirected blame. Ethan did none of that. He simply stood there absorbing every word like punishment he believed he deserved. Finally his gaze shifted toward Clara. "Daniel would have loved you," he said quietly. Clara felt her chest tighten painfully. Ethan reached slowly into his coat pocket and removed a folded document. "After I left the hotel tonight," he said, "I went into the family archives." He placed the papers gently onto the piano beside the photograph. Clara unfolded the first page carefully. Her breath caught instantly. It was a birth certificate draft dated 27 years earlier. Father, Daniel Calloway. Mother, Sophia Hale. Clara's hands began trembling. Ethan's voice dropped almost to a whisper. "My father erased every official record before it could be filed." Silence crushed the room again. Then Clara noticed something else stamped faintly across the final page. Confidential Paternity Agreement. Signed by Richard Calloway. And beneath it, another signature she recognized instantly from the photograph. Daniel Calloway. Clara could barely feel the paper in her hands anymore. The apartment seemed suspended in complete stillness while rain whispered softly against the windows and the old radiator clicked somewhere near the kitchen. Her eyes remained locked on Daniel Calloway's signature at the bottom of the document. Real. Careful. Undeniable. For 27 years, Her existence had been reduced to silence by people powerful enough to rewrite records like they were editing business contracts. Clara slowly lowered the papers onto the piano. "He knew about me," she whispered. Ethan nodded once. "Yes." Sophia looked away immediately, shame crossing her exhausted face again. "Daniel found out 3 days before I left." Clara turned toward her mother in confusion. "But you said you disappeared before the wedding." Sophia's eyes filled softly. "I did." Her voice trembled. "But Daniel found me before I boarded the train to Boston." Clara remained silent while Sophia struggled to steady her breathing. Ethan stood motionless beside the piano, listening carefully like someone piecing together the final fragments of a shattered memory. "He begged me not to leave," Sophia whispered. "He said none of it mattered. Not the company, not his father, not the money." A faint broken smile appeared on her lips. "He wanted to raise you somewhere quiet near the ocean. He already had names picked out." Clara felt tears burning behind her eyes now. She had spent her entire life believing she came from absence, from abandonment, but suddenly the story looked entirely different. She came from 2 people who had been separated before they ever got the chance to become a family. "Then why did you still leave?" Clara asked softly. Sophia looked directly at Ethan now. "Because Richard Calloway showed me documents proving Daniel would lose everything if he married me." Ethan's jaw tightened immediately. "My father would never allow weakness near the company," he said quietly. That was his favorite word. Weakness. Sophia nodded slowly. "He said powerful families survive by cutting away liabilities." The sentence hung heavily in the apartment. Clara glanced toward the rain-darkened window while anger moved silently through her chest again. Somewhere downtown, enormous buildings still carried the Calloway name in gold letters across polished glass towers. Wealth survived. Legacy survived. Meanwhile, her mother spent decades hiding in a tiny Brooklyn apartment teaching piano lessons to children just to afford medication. Ethan stared down at the old document for several seconds before speaking again. "There is more." Clara looked up immediately. Ethan removed another folded paper from inside his coat. Unlike the others, this one appeared newer, cleaner, recently printed from archived files. "I found it in a sealed legal folder tonight," he said quietly. "My father kept it hidden." Clara unfolded the page carefully. Her eyes moved across the typed words slowly at first, then faster. Suddenly her breathing stopped. The document was a private investigation report dated 2 weeks before Daniel's death. Subject: Sophia Hale. Pregnancy confirmed. Surveillance ongoing. Recommendation: immediate separation advised before public announcement. Clara's hands shook violently now. "He had Mom followed." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "Yes." Sophia covered her mouth softly, tears slipping silently down her face. "I never knew." Ethan looked devastated by the realization himself. "Neither did I." The old piano beside them reflected dim lamp light across the silver ring box while thunder rolled faintly beyond the city. Clara stared at the report again until one final line near the bottom caught her attention completely. She froze instantly. "What is it?" Ethan asked. Clara lifted the page slowly. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "There is another name here." Ethan stepped closer. Sophia looked up as Clara read the final sentence aloud. "Secondary contact assigned to monitor situation. Jonathan Pierce." Silence crushed the apartment again. Ethan's face lost all color. Sophia looked terrified. Clara frowned immediately. "Who is Jonathan Pierce?" Ethan swallowed hard before answering. "My father's former attorney." Clara waited. Ethan's eyes darkened slowly beneath the apartment light. "And the current chairman of Calloway Holdings." The name settled over the apartment like another storm. Jonathan Pierce. Clara repeated it silently while watching Ethan's expression collapse into something darker than shock. Recognition mixed with betrayal. The kind that arrives when someone realizes the past never truly ended. Rain continued sliding down the windows behind them, washing Brooklyn in blurred gold reflections, while the old piano stood between 3 people connected by secrets older than Clara herself. Jonathan Pierce still controls the board, Ethan said quietly, almost to himself. After my father died, he became the public face of the company. Sophia lowered her eyes immediately. Then he knows about Clara. Ethan looked at her sharply. Maybe. Sophia shook her head slowly. No. Men like that never forget loose ends. Clara folded the investigation report carefully, trying to steady the shaking in her hands. For most of her life, power had been something distant. Glass towers downtown. Names printed in financial magazines left behind on subway seats. Now she understood power differently. Power was a frightened 23-year-old woman forced into hiding. Power was a child erased from records before she was even born. Ethan walked slowly toward the apartment window and stared down at the rain-soaked street below. Expensive men usually looked comfortable everywhere. But not here. Not inside a tiny Brooklyn apartment carrying the consequences of his family's choices. Tomorrow morning, he said quietly, Jonathan is hosting the annual Callaway Foundation Gala. Clara frowned slightly. The charity event? Ethan nodded once. Every camera in Manhattan will be there. Sophia looked uneasy immediately. Ethan, he turned back toward them slowly. For 27 years my family buried the truth because they believed money could outlive guilt. His voice remained calm, but Clara could hear anger beneath it now. Controlled. Cold. I am done protecting dead men. Clara stared at him carefully. What are you planning? Ethan stepped closer to the piano and gently picked up the silver ring box beside the lamp. For several seconds, he simply looked at it in silence. Then he opened the box and removed the ring with extraordinary care. Daniel once told me this ring represented a promise, he said softly. Not ownership, not status, loyalty. He looked toward Sophia. My father destroyed that promise. Sophia's eyes filled with tears again. Ethan turned toward Clara now. But I can still tell the truth. Clara felt her heartbeat quicken. Publicly, Ethan nodded. Jonathan Pierce spent decades protecting the Callaway image. Tomorrow he will learn what happens when the family secret walks into the room alive. Silence followed. Then Sophia spoke softly for the first time in several minutes. You think exposing this will fix anything? Ethan looked at her carefully. No, his honesty stunned the room. It will not give you your life back. It will not bring Daniel home. He swallowed once before continuing. But Clara deserves to exist without hiding. The words hit Clara harder than she expected. Because beneath all the revelations and documents and buried scandals, that was the truth that hurt most. Her mother had spent 27 years teaching her how to stay unnoticed. Keep your head down. Work hard. Do not ask questions. Survive quietly, not because Sophia lacked strength, but because powerful people once convinced her silence was the safest form of love. Ethan stepped toward the apartment door again, exhaustion visible in every movement now. Before leaving, he paused beside Clara. Tomorrow night, he said softly, Jonathan Pierce will stand in front of Manhattan's most powerful people celebrating the Callaway legacy. He gently placed Daniel's silver ring into Clara's palm. Warm from his hand, heavy with history. I think it is time someone reminded them who that legacy tried to erase. Clara looked down at the ring resting against her skin while thunder rolled softly beyond the city skyline. Then she closed her fingers around it slowly, not like a waitress holding jewelry, like a daughter finally holding proof she was never meant to disappear.